Hello and a very warm welcome to this latest edition of Talking Germany. And my guest today is a woman who one day, apparently by chance, made the shocking discovery that her grandfather was a murderous Nazi war criminal. In fact, the notorious concentration camp commandant Amon Göth, familiar to very many people from Steven Spielberg's movie Schindler's List. Now, that woman is Jennifer Teege. And I want to say thank you very much, Jennifer, for coming to Berlin today to be here with us on Talking Germany and to share your remarkable story with us. I'd like to begin with a quote. It's a quote from you. You said, on the one hand, I've had a completely normal life. And it strikes me that in that sentence, the very interesting words are, on the one hand. What do you say?
Well, when I was brought up as a child in a foster family first, and then I was adopted. So I had many years in my childhood that were, one could say, normal. I was not in contact with my biological family, and I found out only recently all the things about my mother, my grandmother, and my grandfather that were so disturbing for me.
Yeah, and we're going to be telling the whole story, and it is a fascinating story. The interesting thing that I indicated in my introduction was that there was a major change in your life when you went into a library in town of Hamburg, where you live, and by pure chance you stumbled across a book that changed your life. We'll talk about the book in a second, but I'm very interested in the incident itself. You were drawn to this book.
Yeah.
Do you really believe it was by chance?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I'll just explain you how it was the day. It was a day, it's now 5 years ago, and it was a sunny day, completely normal day in August. So I went to this library, and the library is not a small library, but it's a big library, like the central library. I live in Germany, in Hamburg.
I must interrupt you because I became very interested in this, and I phoned the library to ask them how many books they have. They have 350,000 books.
Yes, I didn't know.
You found one that changed your life. Yeah.
So I don't know, till today I have no real explanation. I just know I went to the library and I was there. I was already there for a while. I was not searching for a specific book. So it was just strolling around. And suddenly I saw this book. It was on the shelf and it had a red cover. So I grabbed the book and I quickly went through the book. First, I had a look at the cover, and there was a small photograph on the left side, and it showed the picture of a woman, an elderly woman, maybe around her 40s, something like this, and she looked familiar, but faintly familiar, not really. It's like someone I knew. There was just something in her eyes that made me, I don't know, wonder. So I took the book and I went through the book, and there were more photographs and there was text, and just went through the pages. And in the very end, there was a summarization, and I could read biographical details. And these details I knew from the paperwork surrounding from my adoption. So when I saw this, somehow, I don't know what happens in the brain. I'm not a brain specialist, but it became clear to me this must be a book, a very special book, and it was a book about my biological family that I haven't seen, or my mother I haven't seen for many, many, many years, and no one told me.
It's such a remarkable story. OK, you've had your first impressions there from Jennifer Teege, and we've heard just a little bit of the story of how her life was changed, as the cliché goes, right out of the blue. Here's a fuller version of that story before we talk again. Jennifer, we've already had a sense of how your life is a real sort of overlapping of ordinary and extraordinary. And just to get a feel for that, I'd like to go back to the occasion when you took the book off of the shelf and you realised your life had changed. Just 3 days later, you were with your son at his first day at school. You know, a very ordinary, everyday occasion. How do you bring those two, the emotions together that are evoked by those two different occasions?
It was almost impossible. There was another incident before. When I found the book, the same day I went home, and I was on my bed, I was reading the book cover to cover. And in 3 or 4 hours, took me. And then I went to the internet and I started to research because I wasn't sure whether all what I had read in the book was true. So I needed to verify. And while doing the research, I found a note that the same day there was in German TV a movie about my mother and the servant of my grandfather who was living in the house in Plaszow, Helen Rosenzweig.
Who's also featured in the movie.
Yes.
Yeah.
So this was the same day. In the evening I was sitting on the couch watching this movie, and I saw how there was everything. I could see where my mother was living now. I could see how my grandfather was executed. So this was so surreal. It was so so strange that experiencing all this and having a all-day life, like going with my parents-in-law and my son to a restaurant because we needed to celebrate was almost impossible. But I managed to do.
And this is all because, I mean, the real challenge for you is it's not just, it's your story, of course, but it's also the story of other people so very close to you in your life, like your grandmother. Tell us a little bit more about her, because she seems to be an incredibly complex character.
She's very complex, and she's a person who was in my childhood someone I knew. So when I found out about my grandfather, this was of course something very distressing. But the thing that disturbed me more was the figure of my grandmother. I told you before that I was adopted, and the circumstances in my childhood were not so. Let's say it this way: it wasn't a safe surrounding for children. My mother was together with a man who did beat her, and so my grandmother was a woman for me who provided me with a safe surrounding, and she was someone who not only liked me, but who, when I came and she opened the door, there was a smile on her face and on my face. So this is what I could remember of my grandmother. And when I read the book and I found out all the other things, and I suddenly got to know a different side of her. It was not that I didn't know before. So it was almost, also impossible to deal with this. And it took me a long time somehow to find a solution, how to integrate this into my life.
And one way that you did that was actually by visiting the concentration camp, which is effectively in a suburb of Krakow in Poland. How did that help you?
The concentration camp is not existing anymore. There's only a place where you can remember. When I went there not to. It wasn't my idea to go there to visit the place, to see the place. More important was for me, I needed to find a way to, with all what I knew then, somehow to continue to live my life. And I always thought when I just... I couldn't, as the granddaughter of Amon Göth, I couldn't say, okay, this is something that was in the past, it doesn't affect me, and of course it affected me, but I needed to leave the past behind. I needed to look forward. So when I went to Krakow, I went there, not to visit, but I wanted to put flowers, to leave flowers there. It was for me, one could describe it or compare it when you visit or when you go to a funeral, because you need to say goodbye, and sometimes you need to say it in a way that is something that is I don't know. Probably you know what I mean.
I know
Everyone
exactly.
knows.
I mean, I don't know. I know
funeral.
what you mean, and I don't know what you mean.
You don't have to go to a funeral. You can say you can do it also privately. But it's a ritual. It's something.
Yeah,
it's a symbol.
It's a symbolic moment for you,
was for me
deeply, personally.
A very important symbol.
Yeah, a moment of closure.
Yes.
I think. Yep.
And I didn't know in advance. I didn't know why it felt so important for me to go to Krakow. But when I left, when I was on my flight back, I felt a great sense of relief.
Okay, we'll talk about that a little bit more in just a second. Before we continue, let's have a look at two scenes from the movie Schindler's List. And we begin with a scene that brings together Oskar Schindler and his accountant Itzhak Stern, who had a profound influence, of course, on Schindler. Shocking scenes. The word that is conventionally used to describe somebody like Amon Göth is evil. Very many people would use that word to explain his pathology, his behaviour. Is that a term that you would use as well? Is that an explanation for what happened?
I think there's a lot of evil in my grandfather, but I don't think that evil exists, like the pure evil. I think when you look at people, everyone was born blank. So people become the way they are by many influences. And my grandfather was, of course, someone who was, especially through the film, a symbol of evil. But mankind is not, you can't divide mankind in evil and good. With my grandfather, it's quite easy, because there's so much evil one can see. With my grandmother, because you asked me about her before, it's less obvious, because she had different sides. She was not killing herself, but she was closing her eyes. So here you can see there's evil and there is some good. She did some good things as well, I mean, with me,
your
but also...
grandmother was an extraordinary mixture of things, because she was perhaps an opportunist who profited from Amon Göth's status in the Nazi time. At the same time, though, in the post-war period, for example, I know that she was an admirer of Willy Brandt, the Social Democrat Chancellor. She had liberal sentiments in her. How do you explain that?
I don't really know. It's also striking because my father is Nigerian, and my father was a friend of someone who was living with my grandmother. She had someone who was renting out a room in her apartment because she needed probably to share the apartment because she needed the money at this time.
That was extraordinary as well for the time.
Yeah, for this time. Yeah. My father with dark skin, I mean, with thinking that my grandmother must have been a racist. This does not really fit. And she also had someone living in the household who was homosexual. At this time, it was not only forbidden, it was something you could go to jail for.
It was illegal.
Yeah, it was in the 1970s. Yeah. So she in her personality, you see how people are. They have good sides and they have bad sides. And with my grandfather, I think the bad sides, they're so obvious that, yeah, there is some evil. But I think he's maybe, one could also define him as a psychopath.
Another extraordinary aspect of the whole story you're telling is that you saw the film Schindler's List the first time. Now, I don't know how many times you've seen the movie. Maybe you only saw it once, I just don't know. But the first time you saw it in Israel. And you had gone as a young student to actually study in Israel. How do you fit that into this whole complex that is your story?
Okay, two questions. The first thing, many people assume that I've seen the movie a lot of times. I saw the movie, and I saw the movie not once. I saw it a few times, but still, it is a movie. What is important for me are all the historical sources. And I know them, and I know that a lot is true. So this is what counts for me more. So I saw the movie, but okay, I don't have to see it 10 times. I saw the movie the first time when I was living in Israel, and I was a student. I was in Israel. I came to Israel in the beginning of my 20s. I was in Paris before, and there I met a girl from Israel who invited me to come over just for holidays. So I went there. And I stayed for 5 years, but this is a different story. But when I was there, I saw the movie in the Israeli television. And for me, it was, I think, the same as it was for everyone. It was touching, but it was something I thought I'm not connected with. Why should I? It was so far from something I could imagine that I did not make a connection.
Yeah.
Something.
Bringing all of this together with your visit to Israel, your long visit to Israel, the fact that you're very familiar with that society. You also, as far as I understand, you went on a visit with Israeli school children to the camp near Krakow, to what remains of the camp. How did they deal with that, and how did you deal with them, and the whole question of guilt?
First of all, I was not sure whether I should do this trip, because I said it once, I'm not a specialist on the Holocaust. So I thought if I go there, maybe they expect me, or they expect someone else, and I can't fulfill the expectation. But my friend Anati, she asked me, and it was the class of her son. And normally they are also accompanied by their parents, so she went with the class. And I decided, okay, this time it's a good idea, I will go with the class. It was a very emotional trip, I think, for both of us, for all the students and for me. It was the same day my adopted father died. So I came straight from the hospital, and I went to meet up with the children. It was, I was not prepared. First, I thought I will do the introduction in Hebrew, and I had no time to prepare something. But still, we were very close, and I told them who I am, and I asked them, or I told them, if you want, you can ask me whatever you like. I will try to explain you, and I will try to answer you the questions. And this is what they did. So we had a wonderful, wonderful encounter, one could say. And yeah, in the end, we were standing in front of the big memorial, and they asked me if I'd like to. They had flowers, and this time I was not alone, but I was with my friends, and they asked me whether I'd like to put the flowers for them, and I did. So I wasn't sure in the beginning also whether whether I am the right person, but because they asked me, I did so, and it felt good.
Good for you. Good for you. Yeah. Well,
and right. And it felt right.
Good and right.
Yeah.
Well, one aspect of life here in Germany in recent decades has been that many of the people who lived through the war years, including victims and perpetrators of terrible crimes like the ones we've been talking about, have, for many different reasons, been unable to talk about their experiences. We have this report on how important it is to share those difficult memories. Jennifer, Germany has a very difficult recent history, there's no doubt about that, and some people confront it and some people are in denial about its recent history. There has been a tendency to view Germany as a society that is scarred, that is haunted by the untold stories. Is that how you experienced Germany as you were growing up? Is that how you experience Germany now, perhaps?
Well, haunted is not the word that I would use. I was born in 1970, so when I went to school in history class, we did talk about the Holocaust. We did talk about the World War. We did talk so much about this subject that we did not even talk about the time after the Second World War. So we never talked about the United Nations or something. It was really, really a big issue in my school. But it was only on an academic level.
People were not talking about their own family experiences.
About their own family experiences.
Ah, yeah.
This is the difference. And for example, like in my family, I can only relate to my adopted family. My adopted grandfather, he was in Africa under Rommel. And we talked about it, but I don't know, maybe I felt some kind of, I felt it's not, I did not want to bother him, you know, to ask more. You know, what was really happening in the war? Did you kill someone? Or like these kind of questions that you feel uncomfortable, you know, when you're supposed to answer. So I did not want to make him feel guilty, or so I just did not ask.
That's interesting. That's your adoptive father, and obviously a very sensitive relationship. Let's talk about your actual biological mother. Since you made the discovery about your own personal story, you have met your biological mother. Tell us what happened there.
I met her. Yes, I met her. After I found the book, I had a lot of questions. Questions about the history, but also questions about our relationship. And there's a blank spot in the year 1970 when I was born. So I wanted to meet her and to find answers to all these questions that were mounting up. When we met, it took me 1.5 years of preparation, because there were so many difficult feelings that I needed first somehow to put everything into place, and also to see her not only as my mother, but as the woman. She's also a woman who is now an elderly woman with her own biography, and she was brought up by my grandmother, who never really told her about her father. So she also grew up with a kind of family secret. And I needed to understand all this first before I could meet her in real life. When we met, it was very warm and a very nice 3-4 hours that we spent together. Unfortunately, yeah, it worked out. It worked out. I thought that we would see each other more often, but I think she needs some time. So at the moment, yeah, we don't.
So when was the last time you saw your mother?
I think 1.5 years ago.
And at the moment, she doesn't want to see you.
Yes, and I always say it this way: my door is open. If she wants to step in, she's more than welcome.
Yeah.
But you can't force someone. No, it's her decision, and I respect her decision, but I hope to have more contact.
When you were younger, you suffered from depression. Can you just, in a nutshell, explain how it felt?
Bad.
That's a nutshell.
Yeah. It feels, for me at least, it felt I had no contact with my inner self, and I felt tired, and I felt full of questions in my head with no answer.
Okay, we'll talk about the symptoms and the possible answers in just a second, because not just in Germany but around the world, depression is seen as an increasingly widespread disorder. It's a complaint that can have a huge impact on people's day-to-day lives, as we've seen with Jennifer, and it's certainly not easy to treat. Our next report features a woman who has written a book about her experience with combating depression. Jennifer Teege, the Haida, the woman in that report, says that she won her battle against depression. Does it have to be a battle that you have to win to overcome depression?
Yes, I do think so.
In your case, I had the feeling that when you described your depression in your book, what you're describing is like a jigsaw. That's yourself. It's your own story, and one or two pieces are missing.
Mm-hmm. I think there were more pieces missing than just one or two. Mm-hmm. I just explained it once. When you make a puzzle, I do like doing puzzles myself. Mm-hmm. So I start with the frame, and then you put in the pieces. And in my life, the frame was missing. So when I found the book, I had the frame, and then I could put in all the small pieces. Mm-hmm. It became a whole picture. And in life, I don't think that, or at least it would be a nice idea, but life is not like this. Probably I won't have all the pieces in the end, but at least I can see the whole picture now. And this is a big, big, big relief, and it's a big difference to how I felt before.
I know some people have suggested that the process for you of writing the book, the intention of writing the book, was a sort of therapy. That's the way some people have interpreted that. Mm-hmm. Are they right to do so?
Absolutely wrong. The book, the chapter with my grandmother, this is a chapter that is very personal because I had not the answers before I wrote the book. And you see a development in this chapter. But it is a book that I wrote because I thought there's so many issues. The issue of identity, the issue of guilt, the issue of self-esteem. What does it make with a child when it's given up at such an early age of its life? All these things I wanted to share with people. Mm-hmm. And I hope, I mean, I don't know, but I hope that a lot of people can relate to this and that it gives them, that it gives
do you hope that
input
people,
to think.
Do you hope that people can relate to the book, or do you know? Because I know that people can, because in the last couple of weeks while I've been working around the book, because I knew I was going to be meeting you, I spoke to so many people who said, yes, the book, the story, they've helped me.
It was my hope when I wrote the book. But now, all what I received, mails, letters, phone calls, yes, people do start to think. And what I want is that it's not a book, that only has of course, the past is important, but you need to look ahead. And the final word of the book is in Hebrew, it's tikva, and tikva means in English hope.
One last question. All that we've been talking about is concerned with how your story was told to you. Yeah? How has that influenced how you will tell the story to your children, even when they've reached the right age?
I already told my children, but I told them not everything, because all the sadistic details and how people were killed with gas, or how the dogs were killing people. This is something you shouldn't share with your children in this age. They're quite small, but they do know most of the things, and of course they know about their biologic family, my family, and I think it will give them a strong feeling of identity, and they won't have to deal with the toxic power that this family secret can have. And now with the book, hopefully in 10 years, they will, not 10 years, maybe 5 years, they will read it and then they have the whole answer.
Thank you. One quick question. We always have a quiz at the end of the show, and I didn't want to have a quiz today. I just wanted to ask you one question, which always strikes me as so important. Do we learn from history, or do we continue making the same mistakes?
I hope we learn from history, but reality shows that we still have to learn a lot, and we're doing the mistakes over and over and over again.
And you are helping us an awful lot to try and avoid doing just that. What a remarkable life. Jennifer Teege, thank you very much once again for sharing it with us. There's more Talking Germany and my blog and our archive on our website. If you've enjoyed today's show as much as I have, come back next week. Bye-bye. Until then, tschüss.